Hello and welcome to VLGA Connect, back with you for another edition of our program sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, where we bring you the latest news from across the sector in Victoria in particular. Special guests join us to dig deeper into the issues of the week, and that's exactly what's happening this week. Tony Raunic will be my one guest. We have two big stories to talk about. That is the appointment of monitors at Kingston and the standing down of the Mayor of Maribyrnong. Details on that coming up. And of course, it's made news, so it'll be leading our headlines this week in Connect News. Well, as I mentioned, two municipal monitors will oversee Kingston City Council until the end of the year. Local Government Minister Nick Stakos has announced that John Tanner will be one of the monitors, with the second yet to be appointed. Mr Tanner is currently a monitor at Hobsons Bay City Council and is the former chairman of the panel of administrators at Moira Shire. Kingston Mayor Georgina Oxley said the council looks forward to working with the monitors and understanding the government's concerns. And Maribyrnong Mayor Councillor Pradeep Tiwari has stepped aside from his duties as mayor and councillor after being charged with traffic offences, including dangerous driving. The charges relate to an alleged incident last June before he was elected to the council. The council said the mayor has stood down in accordance with the Local Government Act requirements and while a legal process was underway. Deputy Mayor Councillor Bernadette Thomas will take on the role of acting mayor in the interim. Andrew Tenney has been unanimously appointed as the new CEO of Colac Otway Shire Council. He's been serving in an interim capacity and previously held the position of General Manager of Corporate Services for 3 years. He brings executive experience as the former CEO of the Magistrates Court of Victoria and has held senior leadership positions in state government. Southern Grampians Shire Council has invited the Prime Minister to visit the region to witness firsthand the severe impact of unprecedented drought on the local farming community and economy. The drought has devastated farmers economically and mentally, with below average rainfall this year indicating conditions may worsen compared to last year. The council has been advocating for better targeted support through various initiatives, including collaboration with other Victorian councils. 6 candidates will contest a by-election for a seat on Wodonga Council after the resignation of Hannah Seymour. Former Mayor Ron Mildren, narrowly defeated by Ms Seymour at last year's elections, is attempting to return to the council at this by-election. The other candidates are Cass Wilson, Matt Burke, Christopher Cox, Angie Westneat and Bobby McKibben. East Gippsland Shire has sounded the alarm over a disturbing increase in dog attacks, with more than 13 incidents reported since early July. The council says most incidents occur when dogs escape from their owners' properties or when they're allowed to roam off-leash in public areas. Council officers are now conducting regular patrols and warning that owners of unleashed or aggressive dogs could face significant fines. And the former General Manager of Edward River Council in New South Wales has rejoined the senior executive ranks in Victorian local government. Phil Stone, who left Edward River in early 2024, is joining Mildura Council and will be in charge of the strategy and growth portfolio. Mr Stone previously held second-level roles at Latrobe and South Gippsland councils before heading across the border to Edward River in 2020. And that's this week's roundup of council happenings in Connect News. Keep up to date with news from around the country on the Local Government News Roundup podcast every Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Well, this week we're going to focus on a couple of issues that have caught attention and the legal reasoning behind these, as much as we can surmise in some of these issues, with Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers back again. Hello, Tony. Welcome back.
Hey, Chris. How have you been this week?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Just a slight head cold, which I'm going to blame on a faux pas I made in last week's episode. I don't know if you picked it up, Tony, when I was referring to the CEO at Strathbogie Shire Council as Rachel Quattrocchi. And then the actual interview, I referred to her as Rochelle. So I'm putting this down as a senior moment, head cold. I recorded the interview about 4 weeks before and clarified with her that her name was Rochelle, and then completely forgot last week when we put it into the program. So my apologies.
We do apologise to Rochelle. These things are contagious, and I think I copied you and followed your mistake. I blame you, but we both.
Well, I'm sure I sounded so authoritative on the matter because I'd done an interview with her. So it is absolutely my fault, Tony, and my apologies to Rochelle. But anyway, I thought I should get that out of the way. After we put last week's episode to bed, as often happens, Tony,
Mm.
significant announcements on a Friday afternoon from the Minister for Local Government in Victoria, Nick Stakehouse, with the appointment of municipal monitors at Kingston. And I think this has caught a few people by surprise, including some at Kingston, when you read the official comments that came out afterwards.
Yes, I did see that. Sort of a hint of concern, perhaps but very embracing by the CEO. Peter Bean saying he's in the council's announcement. Our councillors, executive team, and staff are keen to assist however we can to support the monitors in their role. But also, I think there's a bit of a hint at the mayor's thoughts in her announcement. The mayor, Georgina Oxley, says, we look forward to better understanding the Victorian government's concerns and working closely with the monitors to share our strong processes, governance oversight, and transparent decision
Yeah.
making. Yes,
Before we
sorry.
talk about the actual monitors, Tony, just in light of those comments, these I think were made before the terms of reference were then
Yeah.
made available, weren't they? Which shed some more light.
Yeah, well, the terms of reference certainly do, and interesting. The terms of reference, unlike the ministerial decision, which just talks really about supporting good governance, those usual sort of references. The terms of reference here explicitly mention a couple of things for monitors to look into, which I think we haven't seen before, so are unique. So the first one is the management of conflicts of interest regarding community grants.
Yeah.
And in this case, I understand that there have been sort of discussions in public forums about some persistent council funding of a community festival, and then allegations flowing out of that there may be particular associations with one or other of the councillors and their sort of ethnic community. A second reason that's explicit in the terms of reference is that the monitors need to have regard to council's policies, processes, and practices around supporting adherence to Section 229 of the Local Government Act, which is, of
Yeah.
course, the stand down provision in the Act that was the basis for Councillor Jane Agaton's stand down earlier this year. And of course, there was or remains some contention in local circles about the fact that there was some delay between the relevant charges being laid against the councillor and the councillor being stood down or practically standing down. And so, that raises a question, I suppose, when did the councillor become aware of her obligations, and how quickly did she act? When did the executive become aware, and how quickly did they act to sort of support the practical outcome of Section 229?
Yeah.
And then the third element that struck me, Chris, in the terms of reference was the monitors need to have regard to the adequacy of the councillor induction training program, which I think is perhaps a reference to, were the councillors trained on Section 229? And to be fair, I have someone who's participated in governance training across the sector. I think it would be a rare case that councillors at a council were specifically directed to their Section 229 obligations in their induction training. At the time that induction training occurred after the last election, this section hadn't been used, so it wasn't really at foremost in the minds
Yeah.
of those people conducting the training, or indeed council staff.
But of course, as fate would have it, we've potentially got a second example of that, which we'll come to in a moment. So Section 229 is going to become a little bit more well known, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's the case. But just in terms of the appointment of monitors at Kingston, I'd say I'm surprised that Kingston's been signalled out here. There's a sense of councils where there's significant dysfunction that's causing them, great difficulty in performing their role as councillors, and there's a need for monitors in those cases. In this case, I think what I've observed at least is there's been a flip where you've had a group of councillors in the majority and having the sort of power in the chamber. And there's this dramatic change the last election, as has occurred at a number of councils,
Yeah.
and those councillors in the minority or sort of in the political persuasion of the minority became the majority councillors, and the majority councillors became the minority, and of course have been quite vocal, expressing concerns about the way council's going about its role. To me, that's not really a sign of dysfunction. It's just a sign of the politics of council. But let's see what comes out of the monitors' report. There is, of course, two monitors appointed again here. We've got one named in John Tanner, who's now an experienced monitor, having performed that role at Hobson's Bay City
And and
Council.
and is currently performing that role at Hobson's Bay. So I assume
Yeah.
he's doing double duty till the end of the year.
Yeah, been administrator
Mm.
at the Moira Shire and a commission of inquiry, a part of the commission of inquiry there as well. So presumably there'll be another monitor appointed in forthcoming months, and the initial term is from I think the 26th of August of this year through until the 31st of December.
Yeah, so already in place there with John Tanner, and I would assume the announcement of the second monitor will be coming fairly quickly. And I do can remember as far back as Brimbank when it was under administration, John Tanner served part of that time
Okay.
as an administrator there. So very, very experienced in that regard. Tony, the conflict of interest around community grants
Mm,
one, that's not the first time we've seen this issue
no.
raised. I think a couple of other councils, monitors, terms of reference have had similar sort of issues raised, haven't they?
Yeah, well, that is true, to be fair, but I think it does sort of point to what's in the mind of local government Victoria and the
Mm,
minister there. But it is, community grants can be a difficult issue for councillors who are often heavily involved in their community, even prior to being elected, but remain so as councillors, and so often. Entities, organisations, people are coming to council seeking grants where the council or themselves, or at least one or more of the councillors, has played some supportive role in the community
yeah.
in relation to that organisation.
So another council with monitors in place. I think some monitors' terms have finished in the last couple of months, and I think we might have some outstanding reports to be published. I haven't gone back to check in the last few weeks, so there might be some new reading there, or if not, it might not be far away.
I haven't seen that. I've been monitoring that local
Yeah.
government Victoria website, Chris, for reports.
Mm.
The monitor reports seem to be always published on there, which is excellent. If anyone from local government Victoria is listening, what used to occur is the arbiter decisions were published there. Now
Yeah.
they just seem to be merely tabled at
Oh.
council meetings, which of course makes them public, but if someone from, the community or another council wishes to find them after the event, they're forced to sort of go through council minutes of meetings. And it's nice to have a repository on the local government Victoria website of those decisions.
Well, I think it's crucial
Mm,
actually, because the sector learns from these
mm.
outcomes, doesn't it? And it's all about continuous improvement, surely.
Yeah, so it's been some time since we've seen an arbiter decision
Okay.
published on that website. Mm,
Hadn't picked up on that. All right,
mm.
thanks, Tony. So let's move on to the sort of related issue and the other big story. This broke late last week in some of the mainstream media, and ultimately this week, the Mayor of Maribyrnong, Pradeep Tiwari, has stood aside from his role as mayor and as councillor because of charges related to dangerous driving allegations that occurred, it should be said, long before, months before he was elected to council.
Yeah, that's right, Chris. So the deputy mayor there, Bernadette Thomas, now assumes those roles of the mayor, pending, the outcome of the proceedings related to those dangerous driving charges, an incident in Flemington in June 2024, as you say, prior to Councillor Tiwari being elected. I haven't seen the charge sheet, but one would think that the offence or offences that Mr. Councillor Tiwari's been charged with, the carry a potential penalty that exceeds that 2-year imprisonment threshold
Mm.
under Section 229 of the Local Government Act, and requires, therefore, that there is that stand down. Um, so as we say, this seems to be the second incident this year, and indeed only the second incident that I'm aware of a councillor being stood down pursuant to the operation of that Section 229. So it's worth remembering that there's an obligation on the councillor in that instance, where they are charged with offences that meet that punishment threshold, to notify the CEO of the charges, so that those measures like suspending the councillor's allowance, suspending the councillor's access to, councillor only documents and councillor meetings, etc., can occur.
Tony,
Um,
can I just clarify? I don't know if you've got a thought on this. This might
mm,
be just me being a bit pedantic. Some of
mm.
the messaging here is that Councillor Tawari has taken the action to stand aside because of the charges. Other references are that he's been stood down through the exercise of Section 229. Can the councillor actually stand aside, or do they have to be stood down formally?
So if and I can't definitively say Section 229 was triggered here, because I haven't
Mm,
seen the charge sheet, but if Section 229 is triggered, so if charges are laid that meet that threshold of potential punishment of 2 years imprisonment or more, then under the legislation, the councillors automatically stood down the moment
yeah,
charges are laid. However, there is that practical effect, taking the councillor's security pass away, their access to, the councillor portal, for example. That practically won't be done until the CEO is aware that the charges have been laid. So there's this obligation upon the councillor to notify the CEO um, promptly after the charges are laid, so the CEO can give effect to
yes, yeah,
Section 229. Now, what's happened here seems to be similar to what happened previously in Kingston with Councillor Agaton, in that there has been a considerable delay between the laying of the charges and that coming to the attention of the CEO, and so the practical effect being given. And so that really points to the obligation of the councillor in question to notify. You've been a CEO before, Chris. You don't receive private details of
no,
every time a councillor has an interaction with Victoria Police,
no.
and so in this case, I believe what the councillor has said is that he wasn't aware of the charges until an arrest warrant was issued for him recently.
Right.
That was quickly cancelled when his lawyers, contacted the court, and I believe there's a court hearing in October. So the question now is, will we see Councillor Tawari return to that mayoral role this term? Given his mayoral term expires in November, will these proceedings be resolved by then? And of course, if he is convicted, then he will not be entitled to sit as a councillor.
Yeah. So he's made statements to local press that he expects this to take weeks, not months, and that he
Mm,
expects to be returning to his role. Of course, that remains to be seen. And I was just thinking, as you were describing all those nuances, we're
mm.
getting into Rumsfeld territory with known unknowns and unknown unknowns, particularly when you're sitting in the CEO role. There's some vagueness to all of this, Tony, that I expect is going to be clarified with some advice potentially to the sector as a result of the application of these cases, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, and I can see some value in that. I think some of the questions that um, council CEOs might have is, well, what's my obligation if I hear that I hear um, some stories that Councillor Tony might have got himself in trouble on the weekend? Do I have an obligation to, you know, call him in and say what's occurred, and then if Councillor Tony says, "Oh no, it's all fine," I haven't been charged, or what I've been charged with wouldn't reach the 229 threshold. Do I, as a CEO, have an obligation to say, well, prove that to me? I want to see the charge
Yeah.
sheet, or is that something private
It's tricky space,
between?
isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You'd expect, I think, the CEO to have the conversation in the first place, at least ask the question once they become aware of something that they think might be approaching that threshold. But where it goes to from there, I think, is not simple.
Yeah. Well, you can imagine a councillor might say, it doesn't meet the threshold, so it's none of your business.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And a lot of this might hinge on the relationship that the CEO
mm.
has with that councillor and councillors more generally too.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
See it
I
play
agree.
out.
So I think really, it will be valuable for CEOs to learn from this exercise, and I think that one would expect that the CEOs at Kingston and Maribyrnong, Peter Bean and Celia Haddock, I think they've been at the coalface, it, it, you know, doing something for the first time for the sector here, and one feels for them having had to sort of navigate something without any sort of prior history or experience from their colleagues to reference.
Tony, so given that the terms of reference for the monitor appointment at Kingston references the Section 229 issue, given that that appears to be playing out now at Maribyrnong, should we be drawing a line between those two and thinking that the minister's likely to put a monitor in at Maribyrnong as well?
Well, there'd at least appear to be some consistency in that approach, wouldn't there? If
Mm.
that was one of the motivating reasons to appoint at Kingston, one would think that similar circumstances exist at Maribyrnong. Not just, I think, the fact that there's a 229 stand down, but there has been that delay. And I think it's
Mm.
that's the delay in the charges being laid and the stand down taking practical effect is is what creates a concern, and we might need some processes around, because of course, like what occurred in the city of Kingston, there will now be an exercise being undertaken at Maribyrnong if indeed the stand down relates to Section 229. Did Councillor Tawari participate in decisions at Maribyrnong Council while he ought to have been stood down?
Yeah.
And was his vote definitive in those decisions? Did he exercise, for example, a casting vote at any point? Because that might shed some doubt on whether that decision remains valid.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's tricky space. All right.
Nasty position for
It
the
is.
executive to be in. Yeah.
All right. And with some new CEOs coming into the sector, important to have clarity about these things. We've had an announcement this week of the new CEO at Colac Otway, Tony. Andrew Tenney has been the interim there, has been appointed into that role on an ongoing basis. So congratulations to Andrew. Have you done any work with him and
No, he's the
Colac Otway?
former CEO of the Magistrates Court of
That's right.
Victoria,
Yeah.
and has
Mm,
more lately, of course, been one of the directors at Colac Otway.
mm.
So he's an internal appointment and knows that council very well. So there's some continuity there for, the staff team and the councillor team at Colac Otway. But yeah, congratulations to Andrew.
Yep, good appointment. So I think there's a handful. I think there's 5 still to be sorted out, and questions swirling about what's happening with a couple of those, because it's been quite some time waiting to see what they're going to do with their CEO appointments. And of course, as soon as we hear anything definitive, we'll bring it to you on VLGA Connect and the local government news roundup.
Breaking the
Tony,
big stories, Chris.
indeed. We try to keep our finger on the pulse, as I know you do. Thank you for that. 2 significant stories this week, so we wanted to have you back.
Mm,
And I'm not sure when we'll see you next, but who knows? When news
mm.
breaks and you want to find out the ins and outs of the legal issues, come here to VLGA Connect, where Tony will fill us in. Thanks, Tony. Okay, before we leave you this week, places are filling fast for the VLGA's Mayoral Leadership Program. You need to book now if you'd like to secure your place. That's coming up on Friday, the 28th of November at the Monash Conference Centre in Melbourne. The program is in its second year and is designed to equip mayors and deputy mayors with the knowledge they need to lead their council effectively and with good governance at their foundation. The full-day program will cover the roles and responsibilities of a mayor, the mayor-CEO relationship, how to chair a council meeting, managing difficult conversations, dispute resolution, and effective communications and media training. It directly aligns with the state government's mandatory professional development requirements for mayors and deputy mayors, which must be undertaken and completed by the 31st of December. So that's coming up on Friday, the 28th of November. There's been strong interest, so if you would like to participate, you need to get in and book your place as quickly as you can. Find out more by speaking to someone at the team there at the VLGA or head to the website at vlga.org.au. And that's our program for this week. Thank you for watching and listening VLGA Connect. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on YouTube or your podcast player to make sure you don't miss future episodes. And thanks to Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, our terrific sponsors. We'll be back with more VLGA Connect next week.